Hi, everyone. We are back. And once again, I have Dr. Cathleen with me, who, quick little plug, yes, does telemedicine. She is one of our advisors with BFit Systems. And today we are coming back to talk about insulin resistance, which I find very fascinating. And she's going to break it down very simply for you. I find it fascinating, Doc, from the standpoint of there really are very few, almost to no symptoms. Yet, as a double certified nutrition coach, I see a lot of women with this issue. So, the first thing that I find is very fascinating, and I want you to talk about this, is that we all think about hormones. And when we think about hormones, we automatically think estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all those things. But what a lot of people don't realize is that insulin is a hormone. So, talk to us more about how insulin works within our body.
Well, thank you for having me on, Martha. And one thing that I love about you, here's the plug-in, is that you get it. It's not just a weight loss program that you're providing your audience, your followers. It's about taking care of their whole entire health because your body functions as a whole entire unit. And you understand that insulin is a hormone, and it's a very, very important hormone when we deal with weight loss.
So what I find, again, we are, as BFit Systems, HIPAA compliant. And what I often find with women in their 40s and above is that a lot of them don't even realize they're insulin resistant. Now, of course, this can also happen at any other point in your life. But for me, it's almost as if when I onboard clients, there's like this light switch that has been flipped. And suddenly it's almost safe to assume that a lot of women in their 40s are insulin resistant. So from a doctor's standpoint, can you describe exactly what insulin resistance is?
Absolutely. Well, let's start on the signs and symptoms of what insulin resistance looks like. So then we can relate it to ourselves and we can actually see it within our family, our friends, and things like that. So I'm just gonna go through signs and symptoms of insulin resistance. For those listeners out there, stop what you're doing, grab a pen and write this down. Perfect. Number one, belly fat. Number two, sugar cravings. Number three, metabolic syndrome. What is metabolic syndrome? That means prediabetes, high blood pressure. So if your blood pressure measures above 130, over 80, you're insulin resistant. High cholesterol. So your HDL, which is the good cholesterol for men out there, if it's less than 40, you're insulin resistant. For women out there, if it's less than 50, you're insulin resistant. Number, high triglycerides. If your triglycerides is greater than 150, you're insulin resistant. Number four, aches and pain. Muscle aches and pain, joint aches and pain, or what we call insulin resistance because you have inflammatory issues. And I'll break it all down and simplify it as much as possible. Number five, non-alcoholic fatty liver. So if your liver enzymes are high, you're insulin resistant.
Yeah, on that one, you and I have talked about my liver levels. And I'm going to be fully transparent here as your client. You and I have looked at my liver enzymes, and it's been very interesting. Again, non-alcoholic fatty liver. So yeah, I completely understand that one.
And you'll see once when we optimize your hormones, optimize everything else, you'll see those liver enzymes starts to go down. That's the beauty of our body. Our body has the ability to heal itself from the inside out. Yep. So it's just amazing what our body's able to do. And then number six, always hungry. No matter how much food you eat, you're always hungry. So that's insulin resistance. And number seven, and this occurs with our younger patients or demographics, it's called PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. When these young women are coming in with these signs and symptoms, they're full-blown insulin resistance. And a lot of times, because of the beauty of their age, when I'm able to go in there and address that insulin resistance, their hormones become normal. And so their skin clears up and then they shed the weight on their own. So that's pretty cool. And then number 8,
Go ahead.
skin tags.
Wow.
Skin tags is an indication of insulin resistance because those are pre-diabetic signs and symptoms. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And I wish more and more people understand that. So again, those are the signs and symptoms of insulin resistance. And here's the stats. 32% of our whole entire US population suffers from insulin resistance. About 80% in patients that are obese are insulin resistant. Yep. So anyone that are obese, unfortunately, we're insulin resistant because that insulin cannot do what it needs to do. About 44% of women are insulin resistant. No wonder we're a hormonal mess.
Right.
And this is the sad part. About 33% of obese children, are insulin resistant at such a young age, teenagers. So because of their age, we're able to go in there, start balancing their hormones, balancing their insulin resistance so they can live a better lifestyle. Yeah. So this is all long-term. So let's go back and define what insulin resistance is.
Right.
So insulin resistant is when your body is unable to produce insulin the way you should. So insulin is produced through your pancreas, and your pancreas sends a signal to the brain and say, hey, you know what? There's glucose, which is sugar level, high sugar level in your bloodstream. Let's go ahead and send this hormone called insulin to try to regulate that sugar, that glucose. So that glucose, think of it as this big round cell. So that glucose is sitting out here in your bloodstream. That glucose is supposed to cross over that cell to wake up that mitochondria, your metabolic machine, right, in order for you to have the energy that you need to burn the food that you eat, to have the energy to think, to create, to do stuff. So what happens is that it gets stuck outside the bloodstream. It can't get in. So the brain say, hey, insulin, go in there and tell glucose what to do. So remember back then when the garbage truck comes out and it cleans up like the streets and stuff like that? Right. So it's like you're throwing this trash, which is glucose, sugar, on the street. The waste management department comes in there and cleans it up. But if we start throwing a bunch of trash out, what's going to happen? They can't keep up with it. So the street's going to be cluttered with smelly, toxic, yucky stuff, garbage. And that's what happens to our body. So our body needs to regulate that insulin as much as possible. Otherwise, it becomes resistant. That means that insulin gets trapped outside the cell. It cannot go inside the cell. So it's like blocking that glucose from entering the cell to create the energy that your body needs.
That's such a great visual of the trash and like the street cleaner. That is perfect. So there are solutions to this. And as you and I always talk about, food is the foundation of everything because it's literally what we're putting in our mouth and what our body does with that food. When I have women or men come in after the age of 40, they may not even realize they're insulin resistant. They may not have had any tests, all those things that would give us markers that they were. Mm-hmm. Also, when I have women come in their 20s or 30s that are diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, I immediately know those younger women need a certain food plan. And I always make an assumption of a woman who's 40-ish or above that I'm going to have to give her a certain meal plan. And this is what I mean by that. So I always like to have this visual of a cup of water, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we were born, the cup of water is empty. And as we get older and older and older, we're pouring water into this cup. And at some point, the water in the cup is going to overflow. And so that's how I break it down really basically with some of our female clients that this whole time when the glass was empty, your body was able to handle the glucose with the hormone insulin. And as we get older, or you're diagnosed as PCOS, it gets to a point where everything just starts to spill over. Your body doesn't know what to do because the cup is full. So these women with PCOS or in their mid to late 40s and above, I automatically know that the best thing for them is to fuel them with protein, lean proteins, and healthy fats and less complex carbs than another woman or man who could be able, their body would be able to handle those complex carbs. And, complex carbs are not the enemy, it's the simple carbs. But even someone who has insulin resistance, their body is to a point where they're resistant or unable to handle the complex carbs. So that's how I proceed with a food plan. How do you proceed as a doctor to assist anyone with insulin resistance?
And just like I mentioned before, you get it. You understand food is important because insulin not only regulates your sugar, your carbs, but it also helps to regulate your protein and your fats. And that's why your program is more patient, client specific, depending on their age group, depending on what their needs are. And I think that's really important because it's not just controlling sugar. What it does is that insulin signals your cell to provide the nutrients for every single organ in your body. I remember I did this little health talk when my son was in 3rd grade. Now he's in college, his 2nd year. So what I did was that I was like, imagine if you eat a piece of whatever protein, what happens to the body? Okay, you eat a piece of chicken. They're like, oh, it goes in your mouth and it comes right out. I was like, no. When you eat that, your gut has to produce the right enzymes to break it down. Then when it's broken down, your small intestine breaks it down to little nutrients and then deliver those nutrients throughout your body, your brain cells, your thyroid, your ovaries, your breast tissues, your liver, your kidneys, every single organ in our body. So when you become insulin resistant, your body's resistance to this hormone called insulin, it cannot get into the cell. So what is it going to happen? Of course, the signs and symptoms that I listed before, and also long-term, especially the 40 and above age group, it affects on hormones. It's going to affect our estrogen, our testosterone, and our progesterone. I mean, those are hormones that's critical for perimenopausal and menopausal women. It helps us to kind of like feel like ourselves again, otherwise we're walking around with this cloud of stuff where not only the scale won't move and we can't fit into our clothes, that's the reality of it, because our body's hanging on to the fat. So what we need to do is, just like you mentioned, kind of like open that spigot so that water can flow through, so then you can pour new water in there, new macronutrients, new nutrients to fuel your body what it needs. And that insulin will actually listen to you, so it won't be so stubborn and resistance to what you're trying to do.
Right. So anyone who is dealing with this, it can be reversed, right?
Yes.
Right. So if anyone is watching this, and I will give them the information to get a hold of you, again, telemedicine, phenomenal. What kind of tests would you run to give them the diagnosis if they're questioning it?
I would say that I would start out with their basic hormonal panel. I would definitely look at the thyroid, just because even if you're losing weight, even if you're maintaining your goal, let's see what's happening inside your body. So I would definitely suggest, you can reach out to our practice, or you can go and talk to your primary care physician and say, hey, can you order these hormones for me? And stop what you're doing, pull out your pen and just write these down, okay? Write this down. Thyroid panel. I would love for them to order the TSH, the T3 free, T4 free, TPO, and reverse T3, and also your ferritin level. Hormone wise, I like for them to order testosterone, estradiol, and also progesterone as well. So those are really important. So those are kind of like the pearls that I like to throw out there, because I think it's important for us to look at your whole entire picture. We want to make sure that we balance the body from the inside out.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you for simplifying this. I know it's this diagnosis or this mysterious thing, because when we think about the word insulin, I think a lot of people automatically assume that insulin is bad, and that's not true. It's not true. It has a purpose within our body. Just at, if you've been diagnosed as PCOS, which I was in my 20s, and then us women who are in our 40s and above really need to be attentive to this, because it absolutely affects how you feel, how you process the food. And quite honestly, if you're carrying some extra weight, where you're carrying that weight, as you mentioned, quite often it's that belly fat that a lot of women in their mid 40s and 50s are like, when did this happen, right? All of a sudden you're like, I can't get rid of my belly. Dr. Cathleen, thank you so much. We will be linking how all of you guys can get a hold of Dr. Cathleen. Telemedicine, you can text her clinic, super easy. Thank you so much for joining us and really educating us on a very important topic that everyone needs to understand.
Yes, I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.